power, fear, absolute control. Some men don't just ride with the Hells Angels, they rule from the shadows, their influence extending far beyond prison walls. Behind bars, these men don't break. They dominate, running operations with the same brutality that put them there in the first place. They are not just bikers, they are architects of terror, masterminds of criminal enterprises, and executioners of the Hells Angels' ruthless code. From orchestrating murders to running racketeering rings from the inside, these men are the most feared Hells Angels in U.S. prisons. And their stories? They're darker than you could ever imagine. Paul Ade. A man living two lives, one as a successful stockbroker, the other as a feared Hells Angel. Paul Ade wasn't your typical biker, but behind the polished suits and financial deals, he was a man capable of unspeakable violence. It all unraveled on a fateful night in 2001 when Cynthia Garcia, a mother of 6, unknowingly signed her death sentence by insulting the wrong people at a Hells Angels clubhouse. What followed was sheer brutality. She was beaten, thrown into the trunk of a car, and abandoned in the Arizona desert. 2 years later, Operation Black Biscuit exposed Ade's involvement in drug trafficking and murder, but when given bail, he vanished. With the help of a fake passport, he lived on the run for years until 2011, when he was finally caught in Argentina. But even then, supporters fought for his freedom. It didn't matter. In 2018, Paul Ade was back in Arizona this time, in handcuffs, facing the justice he had escaped for too long. Christopher Ranieri. Some men kill for power. Christopher Ray Ranieri killed to prove a point. As the president of the Salem, Massachusetts chapter, his word was law, and in 2014, Joel Doughboy Silva broke it. The details are chilling. Silva was lured to the Fresno clubhouse under false pretenses, executed on the spot, and his body incinerated like it never existed. His truck burned to ashes. And Ranieri? He flew to California to celebrate, basking in the bloodshed. But every empire falls. In 2023, after years of investigations, Ranieri was convicted of racketeering and murder, cementing his place as one of the most feared and most fallen Hells Angels in history. Adam Lee Hall, revenge. That was all Adam Lee Hall wanted, and he got it in the most brutal way imaginable. When David Glasser testified against him in an assault case, Hall knew one thing: Glasser had to die. But Hall didn't just want him dead. He wanted no witnesses left breathing. So, in September 2011, Glasser and 2 of his friends vanished. 11 days later, their plastic-wrapped corpses were found dumped like garbage. The message was clear: snitches don't live. But Hall's arrogance was his downfall. In court, evidence stacked up like a house of cards, and in the end, Hall was sentenced to life with no chance of ever walking free. George Wein. Some secrets never stay buried, especially when there are bodies involved. George Wein, the vice president of the Oakland chapter, thought he had escaped his past. But when 3 corpses were found on his ranch, the truth unraveled fast. The victims? 2 Hells Angels who had dared to betray the club. But that wasn't all. Wein was deep in debt to a fellow biker named William Zorro Mitten, and when Mitten mysteriously disappeared, law enforcement connected the dots. Facing overwhelming evidence, Wein turned on the club, cutting a deal to testify against his own brothers. His fate? Witness protection? His name erased from history, but his betrayal never forgotten. Robert Chico Mora. Before the Hells Angels controlled Arizona, Robert Chico Mora and his Dirty Dozen ruled the streets. Mora was a man of power, violence, and absolute dominance. And in 1996, he pulled off the ultimate move. He orchestrated a full-scale patchover, forcing the Dirty Dozen to merge with the Hells Angels. Those who refused? They vanished. Mora's rise was legendary, but so was his fall. Convicted of murder, drug trafficking, and weapons charges, Mora spent years dodging the law. But time caught up, and so did his health, forcing him into the one place he fought to avoid prison. Brian Wayne Wendt. Loyalty is everything in the Hells Angels. It's more than just a word, it's the difference between life and death. And when someone violates the club's sacred code, punishment is swift, brutal, and permanent. No one understood that better than Brian Wayne Wendt, a man who enforced the rules with violence. Wendt wasn't just another enforcer, he was the executioner. His defining moment came in 2014, when Joel Silva crossed the line. The exact reason? Some say he had an affair with another member's wife, others claim it was simply disrespect. Either way, Silva was marked for death. Wendt personally lured him to the Fresno clubhouse, where the execution was carried out with precision. The next step was just as cold-blooded. Silva's body was cremated. His truck burned to ashes, every trace of him erased. The club moved on like he never existed. But the law never forgets. Years later, investigators connected the dots, leading to a massive takedown. In 2022, after an intense trial, Wendt and his accomplices were convicted of murder and racketeering, sentenced to life behind bars. But here's the thing, even in prison, his name still carries weight. The Hells Angels never truly let go of their most loyal enforcers. And Wendt? He's still a feared man, even from inside a cage. Sonny Barger. Sonny Barger didn't just join the Hells Angels, he built their empire. The founder of the Oakland chapter, and later the national president, Barger was the face of the outlaw biker world. Under his rule, the Hells Angels transformed from a local gang of misfits into an international criminal organization. Drugs, weapons, contract killings, he had a hand in all of it. But Barger wasn't just a criminal mastermind. He was a symbol, a man who embodied the outlaw lifestyle with such conviction that even law enforcement respected him. He did time for drug trafficking and gun smuggling, but it was his 1987 conviction for conspiring to blow up a rival clubhouse that cemented his legend. 4 years in federal prison didn't break him. It made him more untouchable. Even cancer couldn't stop him. After losing his vocal cords, he continued writing, continued leading, continued being the force behind the Hells Angels' expansion. By the time he passed in 2022, he had spent over a decade in prison, but his power never faded. His name will forever be etched into biker history, the ultimate outlaw who turned a gang of bikers into a brotherhood of criminals. Thomas Heath. If the Hells Angels needed someone to get his hands dirty, Thomas Heath was their man. A career criminal, Heath thrived on chaos, racking up a rap sheet that made even seasoned outlaws look tame. His crimes weren't random, they were ruthless, calculated, and meant to send a message. The 1977 Los Angeles auto shop bombing? That was Heath. The murder of a 15-year-old and a 22-year-old in the crossfire of a biker war. Heath again. But even prison couldn't tame him. Convicted of second-degree murder in 1994, he served 7 years, got out, and went right back to his old ways. His violence wasn't just against outsiders, it extended to anyone who crossed him, including his own wife and her son. In 2010, his brutality reached a boiling point when he refused to leave a woman's house, threatening to kill her and invoking the Hells Angels' name to terrify her into silence. That was his final mistake. With multiple convictions for murder, bombings, and assault, Heath was finally sentenced to 35 years to life. He may have believed himself untouchable, but in the end, even the most ruthless enforcers can't escape the weight of their crimes. Merle Herman. When the Hells Angels needed a body to disappear, they called Merle Herman. A master of cover-ups, Herman's methods were horrifying. He cremated victims inside funeral home incinerators, ensuring no trace remained. But in 2022, it all caught up with him. Investigators tied him to multiple missing persons cases, linking him to a web of disappearances. The punishment? 4 years in prison, a light sentence for a man who turned human bodies into ashes. Raymond "Rain Man" Folks. Some men rule with respect. Raymond "Rain Man" Folks ruled with fear. As president of the Sonoma County chapter, he didn't just enforce the club's rules, he made people suffer for breaking them. His most infamous crime? A brutal act of revenge against a fellow Hell's Angel who had an affair with his common-law wife. Folks wasn't content with just punishing the man, he made sure it was a lesson no one would forget. He lured the man into a warehouse, where he was beaten mercilessly, his body shattered by fists, boots, and weapons. But Folks wasn't done. He turned on the man's wife too, threatening her with death if she spoke a word. His violence didn't stop there. He ran drug rackets, enforced debt collections with force, and intimidated witnesses into silence. Eventually, his empire crumbled. Convicted on RICO charges, witness intimidation, and felony assault, he now faces up to 60 years in prison. His reign of terror is over. But inside those walls, he's still feared, because men like Folks don't just disappear. These men weren't just criminals, they were monsters in leather jackets. Their violence, their loyalty to the outlaw code, and their merciless execution of justice made them the most feared figures behind bars. But no kingdom lasts forever. Their power faded, their crimes caught up with them, and now they rot in cells. But their stories? They'll haunt history forever. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the truth behind these outlaws is far from over.